On January 1st, the CCPA, or the California Consumer Privacy Act, goes into effect. This new legislation is a part of a growing desire by consumers to have more control over their personal information and data. The way that it's collected, the way that it's used and managed, and ultimately the way that it's potentially shared and sometimes sold. And although this new legislation is only in California, there is every reason to believe, as legislation like this is in state legislatures throughout the United States, that ultimately it will be enacted in similar ways in other states and potentially even preempted by a federal type of regulation. So this video is going to be critical if you are a publisher, an advertiser, a brand, or an agency, or in any way handle consumer data on a regular basis. Stay tuned, and we're going to give you a detailed background on exactly what the CCPA is and what you potentially need to do next. Hi, my name is Bill Rice, and on behalf of Klein Moynihan Turco, I am here to give you just a broad overview of CCPA and the elements of it that may potentially impact your business operations. Now, before I go into all of the details around CCPA, it's important for you to understand that this video is just to give you a general background of the elements of CCPA so that you can begin your education, and then, most importantly, you can reach out to a competent, experienced attorney in this type of area of law in consumer privacy matters and have a detailed discussion about your particular business operations. Each and every one of you will have a unique set of circumstances and business operations that potentially will be impacted by CCPA. But the only one that can accurately guide you in what you need to do next is that competent attorney. So again, please reach out after you review this video and talk to an attorney who's experienced in consumer privacy matters and in particular on CCPA. The very first thing that I want to do in this video is to give you a very firm foundation on what exactly the language around CCPA is as it pertains to who must comply. So I'm going to directly read the language so that we can get a firm understanding of exactly who needs to comply. There is a lot of sort of ands and ors in this, so you'll need to listen carefully. Let's take a look at who must comply with the new CCPA Act. All companies that serve California residents with more than $25 million in annual revenue, or any companies that collect personal information from more than 50,000 people, or that collect more than half of their revenues from the sale of personal information, must comply with CCPA. Now let me read that one more time again for clarity. All companies that serve California residents with more than 25 million in annual revenue, or any companies that collect personal information from more than 50,000 people, or that collect more than half their revenues from the sale of personal information, must comply with CCPA. As you can see, there's a variety of different triggers inside of that statement. So this is why it's very important for you to really look at your business operations and see if you meet any of those triggering criteria. And then, of course, as I said before, make sure that you're consulting with a competent attorney in consumer privacy that can help to guide you through any potential actions that you need to get into place, or processes that you need to get into place in order to comply with CCPA. Now let's dive into some common questions. I always like to start with the consumer, especially in these type of matters, because ultimately the consumer is who this legislation is attempting to protect. And therefore, it's important for us to look at our business through the lens of the actual consumer and the rights that they may be granted by this new regulation. So let's dig in. What rights does CCPA give consumers? Number one, consumers in California will have the opportunity to opt out of companies selling or sharing their personal information. Number two, all websites will have to clearly display a button labeled "Do not sell my personal information." Number three, the law allows for the consumer twice a year to inquire with a business as to what data has been collected on them, and then has the opportunity to tell that business not to sell that data and to delete it. Number 4, consumers will be able to find out the categories of data that was collected, the parties that it was shared with, and the consumer purpose for which it was collected. And number 5, consumers will have new rights as it applies to data breaches, specifically the ability to sue for up to $2,500 per incident, and in the case of intentional violation, $7,500. So what does CCPA mean for agencies and brands? Well, first and foremost, agencies and brands will probably increasingly need a more sophisticated data management system, the ability to collect and store this information and be able to retrieve the information that the consumers have a right to. As a result, these agencies and brands are probably going to have to increase the sophistication and the security behind these data management systems. And then, of course, the simple changes in the way that consumer data can be collected needs to be stored and potentially can be used, shared, and sold will make it a little bit more difficult and require agencies and brands to be a little bit more creative in using this type of data and trying to reach the customers that in the past they've been able to target based on this type of data collection. So what does CCPA mean for platforms and publishers? Just like we saw in GDPR, it's going to increase the requirement for platforms and publishers to be diligent and vigilant around their full ad tech supply chain. There are often various players in the mix as it pertains to advertising and particularly in the technical handling of this consumer data. Everything is so electronic anymore. Oftentimes, this collection of consumer data, although it doesn't necessarily need to be online, it could be any offline collection. So any type of collection of consumer data will be impacted by this particular regulation and regulations like it. But often that information is actually stored electronically. So it becomes increasingly important to understand each of the ad tech components that are at play in your overall organizational management of consumer data. One of the best places to start with this is the IAB compliance framework. They spent a lot of time and energy in developing a compliance framework that will help to begin guiding you in answering and managing and handling consumer data as it applies to these various regulations that are becoming more and more impactful on your business operations as it pertains to the protection of consumer data. Hi, my name is Bill Rice, and on behalf of Klein Moynihan Turco, I hope that this video has been helpful in beginning your education to opening a discussion with you and your attorney about how CCPA may affect your business operations and the necessary actions that you need to take as this legislation goes into effect on January 1st. If you enjoyed this video, I encourage you to subscribe to the Klein Moynihan Turco YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell and you will get notified and alerted every time we drop a new video on topics just like this. I also encourage you to visit our website at kleinmoynihan.com, another excellent resource in keeping you up to date on this type of news and how it may affect your business operations.